everybody. Hello and welcome to Pivot to Strength. I'm David Stone. I'm the co-founder of I-FearlessTV. I-FearlessTV is a website and a company and an idea, and basically it's a movement that I'm trying to get going to take us away from the anxiety and the fears that plague us all and that hold us back. And I know that we can do that. And what I'm wanting to do today, in the light of all this crazy coronavirus stuff that's going on, is help us take that fearless approach, take that absolutely I'm in control of my own life kind of attitude, and bring it to our current situation. Because we absolutely can. You absolutely do not have to suffer and lie there, lying awake in the middle of the night, worrying about the disease, worrying about your finances, worrying about your loved ones, worrying about what the world's going to be like. You don't have to do that at all. You can take control of your life. And I'd love it if you'd be able to ride along with me here today while we learn how to do that. Today we're going to go for a couple of hours, and we're going to be talking about a number of different things. A lot of this, in fact, pretty much most of this material that we're going to be talking about today, and the ideas and the concepts and the techniques that we're going to be talking about today come from the book that I wrote and the online course that we've developed and the workshops that we do called Unsubscribe from Anxiety. We're going to be talking more about that in a little while towards the end of the program. But mostly what I want you to do is just relax. I want you to be prepared to take some notes if you want to. Please feel free to jump in with any comments that you have. You can see on the right-hand side of your screen there's a place for you to put in your comments. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to put those in too. And I know that people are going to be joining us along the way, and we'll be happy to take the comments, address the comments, and do our best to help you with this current anxiety crisis that we've got going on. Now, I know that the coronavirus and all the news, I mean, if you're turned on CNN, if you turn on any of the television news, if you keep the radio on, it is nonstop blaring about how things are bad. I saw a headline this morning saying, we don't realize just how bad this is. And it reminds me, that there's an old saying, the pessimists like to say, well, if you're not worried, it's only because you don't realize how bad everything is. Well, you know what? Things are not nearly as bad as we like to think that they are, or as people out there wanting us to believe that they are. And they're trying to tell us that you're supposed to be worried, that we're supposed to be anxious about this. And it does seem quite awful when you read the headlines. But, I woke up this morning, there was an absolutely gorgeous sunrise. The air was clear, the birds were singing, and it was a beautiful morning, just like every other morning when I wake up. Now, the sun isn't always shining. Sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's cloudy, but it's always a beautiful morning. And every day I wake up, I have another opportunity to get it right. I have another opportunity to show up as the me that I want to show up as. And you have that same opportunity as well. You have that same opportunity to show up as the you that you dream about being, to show up as the best you possible. And the best me and the best you possible probably does not include a whole lot of anxiety and worry and fear to dominate your life. The best you and the best me to show up includes that feeling of strength, that feeling of power, that feeling of I get to decide how my life is going to unfold, how my life is going to be lived on a day-to-day basis. That's how I want to show up. And I think that that's probably how you want to show up too. And I want to talk about that here today. And one of the things that we want to realize as we go through today, and just by way of introduction before we really get started, is that while anxiety might be a very normal response. Anxiety might be something that that you see everybody around you doing, but that does not necessarily mean that it's a natural response, and it certainly doesn't mean that it's a useful response. Right? Anxiety is normal. There's a lot. That's because everybody does that, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Why is it that anxiety and fear and worry are so widespread? Because when we think about it and when we really examine what's going on, what we discover is that worry and fear and anxiety really don't help at all. They, in fact, they impede us from taking on this challenge, this challenge that has arisen in our lives and that's out there facing us. The fear and anxiety that we feel don't help in the least. And in fact, they hinder us from responding as the best us that we can possibly be. Because anxiety, it pulls you down, it weakens you, it literally makes you weaker. We have a wonderful little exercise that we do in our live workshops, and it's called the muscle test. And we have a way of demonstrating how putting an anxious thought into your head or a worrisome thought into your head literally makes you weaker than you were. We can put in, and we test your muscles. We put out there and sort of apply some weight there. And when I tell you thoughts that are uplifting and encouraging and joyful, you're tremendously strong. And I can push it as hard as I want on your arm and it won't go down. But then when I put an anxious thought into your head or a worrisome thought or a negative thought into your head, your arm weakens considerably. We can demonstrate this, and we do this in our live workshops. So anxiety and that worried response that we all have does no good at all. It doesn't make your head clear for thinking and problem solving. It doesn't make you healthy. In fact, I mean, the list of negative side effects that comes from anxiety and worry is as long as your arm. It's amazing the things that happen. But the biggest thing that it does is it robs us of our innate human potential. It sucks us down and it makes us weaker. It makes us not able to be showing up as that us that we want to be, as that strong, that vibrant, that capable you. You know, it feels, and now, it's been a couple of months now that we've all been locked indoors. And I get it, it seems really awful, but it almost feels like we're hiding under a rock. Almost feels like we're, kind of curled up in that fetal position, afraid of what's going on out there. Well, let's call this long enough, all right, to huddle in fear. And let's decide that starting right here, right now, today, we're going to make that pivot. We're going to make that pivot to the real you, to the strong you, to that capable you that is inside. You can feel it inside you there. It's been hidden for a little while now, for a couple of months. And the more we expose ourselves to negative news and the more we think about it and the more we converse about negative news, the more we curl up into that emotional fetal position. So let's call that enough, shall we? And let's start off. And what I want to do by starting today, I want to do a little exercise with you. And the exercise is designed to show us that not only have we been through things like this before, and that on a regular basis, things show up in our lives that are not necessarily fun. Life hands you that lemon. But I also want to show that we've overcome it before. So what I want you to do, what I invite you to do right now is to think back over your life, or maybe, the last 10 years or the last 50 years, however long you've been around. And I want you to think back and recall the biggest, most challenging, the worst thing that has ever happened to you. Now, we've all got a bunch of them. I've got a bunch myself. I've been fired from jobs. I've been, I had a house foreclose on me in the housing downturn of 2008. I went through a divorce. There's all kinds of things that we've all experienced. Right now, we're experiencing a challenge in our lives. But I want you to think back to a recent one, not one that you've dealt with before previously in your life. I want you to think back to that one. Put yourself back there in that mind space. Put yourself back into that time when you were feeling that challenge. And those feelings of worry and anxiety were overcoming you, and you felt bogged down and you felt constricted. At times it affects us physically. It's hard to breathe sometimes, and our blood pressure goes up, and there's all kinds of terrible feelings that are rushing through us. We feel weak. We feel disempowered. So go back to there for a few moments and recall that event. Just from a business point of view, and I do a lot of work with businesses around the country, from a business point of view, I've had three major recessions as a business owner. I've been self-employed most of my life, and I went through three major recessions. I started a business just as the major recession in the early 90s hit, and it was at its peak. And then we had 9/11 and the dot-com bust of 2000. And all those things kind of piled on top of each other, and the bottom fell out of the economy. Oh, and then in 2008, when we had the housing crisis, and the bottom fell out of the economy again. We've all been there. We've all lived through these events. And in the moment of those events, it feels like there's no tomorrow. It feels like the dark is closing in on you. It feels like you can't see ahead of you. It's like driving in fog, and I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's coming next. And it's a scary feeling. There's no question about that. But now what I want you to do is think back to your emergence from that from that awful event, that worst challenge that you've ever felt. I want you to think back to how it began to feel inside you, the emotions that you were feeling as you started to emerge and you realized that there was light at the end of the tunnel. And that energy started to resurge in you. And you started to think, oh, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to make this. I'm going to make it through this. And you started to stand up a little bit straighter, and you started to breathe a little deeper, and you allowed yourself to smile just a little bit. And what happened in those instances was that it became not a vicious circle, but a joyous circle. Because when you allowed your face to smile, your emotions responded. And when your emotions started to feel a little bit more joyful, your face broke into a smile again, and you couldn't help but feeling good. And you couldn't help but noticing that the spring flowers were starting to bloom, and you couldn't help but noticing that the sun was out a little bit more. And so what I'm trying to show you is that no matter what's going on, in that moment, it feels so burdensome and it feels awful, but there is always, in every single situation that you've ever faced, and the fact is that you're sitting here today alive and watching this program and sharing it with me, proves that you have overcome every single challenge that has ever been put in front of you. Some of them were huge, some of them were small, some of them were mid-sized. But every single event, every single challenge that has ever been put in front of you, you overcame it. You were victorious, just like you're going to be from this one. Just like you are going to emerge from this, and you are going to be just fine. Now, I want to switch. Well, actually, no, let's pause for a moment and take a second and pat yourself on the back for having overcome all those challenges that have faced you previously. Every single event that got in your way, every single barrier that life put in front of you has been cleared out, and you moved on. Now, it might have left a couple of scars, but scars make people more interesting, don't they? And they certainly give you the tools. Because if we go back to those events when life was challenging, in retrospect, what we find is that there were tremendous lessons that we learned. We grew stronger from those. And I don't want to dump on you with platitudes about, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't help. But the reality of it is when you look back on those events that did challenge you in your life, you discovered that you did emerge from them stronger than you had been when you went into them. You knew things that you didn't know before. You had resources and strengths that you didn't have before. All right, now I want to switch. Now I want to pivot a little bit. And instead of thinking about your biggest challenge that you've ever faced, I want you to think back to the victories that you've had in your life, the accomplishments that you've had over your years. And let's start off. Let's go back to the time before you were 18 years old. So when you were a child or when you were a teenager, when you were in high school. I want you to think back to those times and think about and recall now some wonderful victory, some wonderful accomplishment that you achieved in that time. Now, what was it? Maybe it was that you participated in some sporting event and you won a race, or maybe you were a swimmer and you won a race in a competition. Maybe you were in Boy Scouts or Girl Guides and you won a merit badge. Maybe you stood up in front of the class and gave a speech, your first ever public speaking event, and you were terrified before, but you did it. Go back now to that event, and I want you to think about how you felt in that moment when you accomplished that, when you felt that thrill of victory. I remember when I got hired for my very first job, it was working at a silly little restaurant. I think I was 16 years old. And he said, "Yes, I'll hire you." And that felt so cool. I felt like a grown up. I felt like an adult, and I felt the emotions welling up in me, and I felt strong, and I felt capable. And then when I got into college and I got accepted at a school that was hard to get into, and I opened that letter of acceptance, and I felt that same emotion, that same capability, that same strength. And then when I got my first job later on, and I got hired in my first real job in my career, and that boss, that business owner said, "Yes, we'd like you to be here to help us." And it felt so good. I want you to think now about how you felt in those times when you had those accomplishments. Because you know what? That you today, who's feeling anxious, who's feeling worried about this situation, who's feeling oppressed, if you want, that's exactly the same you as it was when you had those previous victories, when you scored that win, when you got that job. It's the same you here today with the same resources. And in fact, today you've got even more resources than you had back then. You've got even more going for you today. You know more, you've learned more, you're more resilient, you're more resourceful, you're more creative than you were then. And look at all the accomplishments that you had up till that point, and you've got even more than that now. We sometimes forget how good we actually are. We forget the capabilities that we actually have. We forget the resources that we can reach down and dig deep to pull out of ourselves. And we allow the negative news and we allow the negative conversations to dominate our thinking. And in the process, we forget the capable you that you actually are, the enormously resourceful you that you actually are, because you have so many talents. And all you have to do is take an inventory. One of the things I think is a great idea, over through our lifetimes, we've all achieved things. We all won trophies when we were kids. We all earned diplomas of one sort or another. but we tend to put them in cardboard boxes and stick them away in the attic. And then we forget about them. And I think it's a great idea to pull those out and put them on the shelf and hang them up on the wall so that you can look at those, just glance at them as you walk by during the day and you think, yeah, look at that. That was me. I did that. I accomplished that. Now, maybe when you look back on it, winning a swim meet was not that big a deal. It wasn't an earth-shaking event, but it doesn't have to be. To you in that moment, it was huge. And what we need to do in these kinds of moments is to relive, to re-feel the emotions that we had, those enormously powerful, positive emotions that we had in that time, because that's where our strength comes from. Our strength comes from those emotions of strength, those emotions of power, those emotions of capability. And so what I want you to do is, as you look at those trophies or as you think back to that event, I remember when I was a kid, I used to like doing mechanical things, and I've always been a bit of a gearhead, motor kind of car guy. And I remember when I was a teenager, I don't know, maybe I was 14 years old or something, and I built a little go-kart. My dad had a workshop and all kinds of stuff in the garage, and I got an old lawnmower motor, and I got some bits of metal and some old lawnmower wheels, and I crafted this little go-kart thing. And it was, when I think back on it, it was just this rust bucket of all these things kind of held together by bits of wire. But it actually ran, and I remember sitting in it holding on to this funny steering wheel that I'd made and bouncing across the front lawn, and I bet the grin on my face in that moment was huge. Why? Because I'd accomplished a goal. And when I think back to that moment, all I feel is tremendous joy. And there is no room in my head. When I'm feeling joy, there is no room in my head whatsoever for anxiety, for worry, for fear. And that's one of the steps that we need to do. When we fill our minds with joy, when we fill our minds with the tremendous pride of accomplishment that we've had in the past, and you've had accomplishments just this past week, I want you to think back about things that you've accomplished just in this past week alone. What is it that you've done? Did you make a great meal? Here we're all baking these days, or reading a book. Did you bake great banana bread? Did you call a friend who needed to be picked up a little bit? Did you do that and make them feel better? That was an accomplishment, and you felt good in the moment. And when you were feeling good in that moment, there was no room in your brain whatsoever for any anxiety. And that's how we start pushing it out. Because in the vacuum of our minds, when we don't have that joy in our minds, then the anxiety starts coming in. There's that old saying, nature abhors a vacuum. Well, when you got nothing in your mind, then the anxiety is going to come in, because the world out there is trying to fill your mind with it. Which takes us on to the next point that I want to make. And that is, we ask, why do I worry so much? Well, the truth is, you have been trained to worry. You have been going through worry lessons since the day you were born. And in fact, even before that, you were probably going through, worry lessons. And, there's a lot of scientific evidence that says that when a woman is pregnant, if she's worried, if she is fearful, that influences the fetus inside. But forget about that. I mean, from the moment you were born, be very, very careful. And when you were small, careful, don't cross the street, but watch out for strangers. And we were taught all the things that we were supposed to worry about. And, it's great when you're 6 years old or 8 years old and you're walking home from school alone. Don't talk to strangers is great advice. But when you're 38 years old and you're still afraid of strangers, and you still have this fear of going up and introducing yourself to people and to new people and talking to them, that's a little out of hand. And what we need to do is start recognizing that we have been trained to be afraid of things, and that the world is conspiring, constantly conspiring to make us even more nervous. I mean, look at, turn on CNN if you dare right now. I allow myself these days about 10 minutes once a day to look at the headlines just to keep up on what's going on. Because I find that if I spend more than 10 minutes, I can feel a huge difference in my mood. And it takes me an hour or so to recover from that because I start to feel my mood going down when I expose myself to all that kind of stuff. Now, I believe, yes, it's important to stay informed, but you can stay informed without drowning yourself in the negativity that's flying around. And of course, along with all the medical news, we've got tremendous partisan politics going on as well. And, just pick your news outlet and take a side. And now it's this giant battle that's going on. We don't need that going on in our heads. There's no room for joy when your head is filled with those kinds of things. So we've had this early training, and the world is constantly reminding us about how anxious we're supposed to be and putting this negative news in front of us. And, there is one little piece of biology that also contributes to our fearfulness and to our anxiety. And that is something that biologists call a negativity bias, and psychologists, a negativity bias. And this is something that was evolved into us millions of years ago. And when we were walking around in the bush and there were saber-toothed tigers out there that wanted to eat us, then it was important to have something built into us that alerted us to something that was unexpected, that might be threatening. But we've evolved, and there are no more saber-toothed tigers running around. And if you step out off the curb and there's a bus coming, then yes, we have that instant reaction and we act, and everything's fine again because we step back onto the curb. But that negativity bias is still there. Only these days, what we're responding negatively to is no more saber-toothed tigers. It's somebody didn't like my Facebook post, or or this, the news that's on the TV. So we can learn to shut that off. We don't need our appendix anymore either, and we don't require for survival this negativity bias. So we can decide to let that go. Now, there's another thing that contributes to us being negative. And the reason I'm spending some time on this is it's really important for us to understand why and how anxiety and worry and our weakness as a result of those comes to us. Why is it we feel this way? And one of the things that contributes is the fact that everybody does this. Right? Who can you point to that does not feel worried? And so it's completely a normal thing. But there's a big difference between normal and natural. Normal just means that everybody does it, right? And it doesn't mean that it's right necessarily. It doesn't mean that it's necessary. It simply means everybody does it. And that does not mean that you have to do it. Remember when your mother used to say, just because Johnny's doing it doesn't mean you should. If Johnny jumped off a cliff, would you do that too? And it's the same with anxiety. Yes, it's completely normal. We had one woman in a workshop not that long ago. She came in and we were talking about this, and she said, my mother's a worrier, my sister's a worrier, my aunts are all worriers, everybody in my family is a worrier, so it just makes sense that I should worry too. And I thought, no, that's a good reason for you to not worry. Just because everybody does it doesn't make it a good idea. But what has happened is, over a long period of time, over your entire life of practicing worry, of discovering that everybody else does it, so I do too, and having people saying to you, well, you ought to worry about that. I'd be worried if I were you. You've all these common phrases that we have. After a lifetime of that, it has become simply a habit. It's a mental and emotional habit that we simply fall into because we've been doing this for so long. We never think about replacing that habit and having some different kind of mental or emotional response. We simply say, oh, here's a bad situation, I'd better worry about it. And we don't question that. Again, because it's so common and because we've been doing it for so long, it has become this habit that we just do without thinking about it. And the problem is that that habit doesn't serve us at all. That habit is not useful. It doesn't solve any problems. It makes us sicker than we might even be ordinarily. And it draws away from our ability to be that strong human being that we want to be. It pulls away from that. It reduces our capabilities. And so, because it's a habit, and because any habit that we have, if we decide we don't like it anymore, it's not serving us well, we can change that habit. And so, with anxiety, what we want to do is replace that worry habit. And that's what I want to help you do today. I want you to help you find ways to replace the habit of worrying that you've had for your entire life. And the truth is that you can stop worrying. There is nothing built into your biology, built into your psychology that says you must worry, that worry is required. And as a result, it is entirely possible to stop worrying. I know this because I stopped worrying. I used to be, the world's biggest worrier. I worried about everything. And in fact, about 10 years ago, I actually managed to worry myself into homelessness. And because the things that we worry about most tend to come true, we tend to attract those things to us for a number of different reasons. But here I was. I worried myself, and I woke up. I'm waking up in my car in a truck stop because I didn't have anywhere else to live. And I finally said, "That's it. I've had it. This won't do. I'm not happy with this. This is not serving me." So I set out to find ways to stop worrying, and I managed. I spent I've spent the last 10 years studying how my brain works, how everybody's brain works, how anxiety and worry get in there, and what we can do to get them out of there, what we can do to get completely and utterly rid of them. Because when I studied worry and I thought about worry, I thought, okay, what does worry have going for it? What's the advantage of worrying? And frankly, I couldn't find very many. I thought, okay, well, there are some people who love the drama of it. Not me. I don't like the drama of worrying and fear. Some people say, they get attached to it and then draws sympathy to them. It's not something that I needed, and I hope you don't either. But the downside of worry was enormous. It accomplished nothing. It didn't solve any problems. It made me sick. It felt awful. Anxiety and fear are some of the worst feeling emotions that we as humans can experience. It's just plain awful. And it makes us sick. So, and then when we add on to that the fact that it drains us of our capabilities. When we're afraid of things, when we have anxiety, we're afraid to try new things. We don't have the nerve to just try something because we think, oh, here's all the bad things that can happen. So that's, so really anxiety and worry have nothing going for them whatsoever. And so what we want to do to start replacing this habit is start learning how to think differently. People who do rock climbing, you've seen those people, climbing up rock faces. There was that movie not long ago about that fella who did that free solo climbing up El Capitan, which is that 3,000 vertical feet straight up that face in Yellowstone Park. No, not Yellowstone, it's in Yosemite. And when people are doing that, when people are rock climbing, one of the things that they're trained to do is not look down. And it's the same for tightrope walkers. If you're on this tiny little 1-inch cable that's stretched across Niagara Falls, the first thing they teach you is do not look down. Now, why is it that you don't look down? Because as soon as you look down, if you're climbing a rock or if you are walking on a tightrope, As soon as you look down, instantly your mind gets filled with all the consequences of failure. You're picturing yourself plummeting to a hideous death. Now you're picturing yourself, and even in the consequences aren't so bad. You've only got the tightrope strung 3 feet off the ground in your backyard, but you're still picturing falling, because that's, as soon as you look down, that's what your mind starts thinking about. And it's the same right now. Anxiety is the same thing. Anxiety is our emotional looking down. Because when we are thinking about coronavirus, when we're thinking about the economic fallout from all of this, what are you thinking about? We're looking down and we're thinking about the consequences of failure. Now, none of those consequences are certain. None of those consequences are guaranteed. Are they a possibility? Absolutely, they're a possibility. And when we choose to focus on those negative outcomes, the likelihood of them coming to us gets a whole lot, increases tremendously, because that's all we're thinking about. And then those things show up in our lives. And so the negativity plays itself out as a result. So what we want to do is start turning around, start shifting our thinking. So instead of looking down and thinking about the consequences of failure, thinking about all the negative things that might happen here, we need to start looking up and turn our gaze and start looking up and seeing the possibilities. Because right now, and I'm doing some coaching with some businesses right now, and of course they're all worried about what's going to happen if they're all looking down. They're all looking at the consequences of the worst possible outcomes. But here's an interesting thought. Both Microsoft and Apple Computer were founded in the midst of the worst recession of the 1970s. Microsoft was founded in 1975. Apple started in 1976. And the economy was in the tank. Sorry about that. At that moment, the economy was horrible. And yet these two companies, founded right smack in the middle, always challenges, crises, create opportunities, not just for businesses, but for we as individuals, as people. We have the opportunity to become something better. We have the opportunity to show up in our lives and in the lives of our loved ones and our colleagues and our friends as somebody strong. We have that opportunity, and this is that opportunity staring us in the face. So we simply have to change that habit from looking down to looking up. Now, we don't even think about habits, and it takes some mental energy to start changing those habits, doesn't it? Let's take a very simple habit that we all have. I want you to take it for a second, and I want you to fold your hands like this. You know how we do this? We just fold our hands. Sometimes you're just sitting relaxed. You fold your hands like that. Now, fold your hands, take a second, but take a look and see which of your thumbs is on the top, because we always just fold it that way. Now, for me, my right thumb is on the top. For you, it might be the other way around, doesn't matter. But what I want you to do now is take your hands, unfold them, and now consciously refold them with the other thumb on top. All right, just go ahead and do that. Doesn't that feel uncomfortable? Doesn't that feel weird and strange? Why? Now, when you look at your hands, there is absolutely, physiologically, there is nothing different about your fingers that makes them be more comfortable this way and that way, except the fact that you've been doing it this way all your life. Now, if you were to say, okay, every day for 10 times a day, I'm going to fold my hands the other way with the other thumb on top. Within a week, that would feel like your new normal, and this would feel strange. Because all you've done is replaced an old habit. You've gotten used to a new normal, haven't you? And that new normal now feels comfortable, whereas it didn't feel comfortable before. But you have to mentally and consciously choose to replace that habit with a different one, don't you? And it's the same with our mental habits. Now, the problem with mental habits is, as opposed to physical habits, is they tend to be unconscious, completely subconscious. We don't even think about the fact that we're thinking about something. It just happens and we sort of accept it as we go along. And so what's necessary is for us to start observing our thinking. And these are some of the first steps that we'll do to regain our strength. And this is our pivoting that we're doing. We've been going like this for so long, and we've been in these mental habits for such a long time that we're going to have to now consciously decide, all right, I'm now going to start thinking differently. I'm going to start changing it. And that requires that I start observing my thoughts, observing my emotions, and seeing and being aware of what's going on. It's like a third party, neutral third party observer of what's going on. You know, somebody's standing there, oh, now he's thinking about this, now he's thinking about that. And that sounds silly, but it's the first steps that we have to take to start changing over to these different mental habits. And that's what we want to do, is shift to a different set of mental habits. Right now, the mental habit that we have is anxiety, worry, automatically worrying about the news that's out there, automatically worrying about what's going to happen to me, what's going to become of me, what does my future hold. And the automatic habit, because we've been doing it for so long, is to look down and to think about all the terrible things that might happen to you. You know, there's another habit that we have. We have that habit of thinking of the worst possible outcome. And in fact, that's just a phrase, you know, when people are chatting and discussing options. And we have that saying, what's the worst that could happen? Well, I always find that a little strange, because why is it that we ask that as opposed to what's the best that could happen? See, there's another habit. We simply always say, what's the worst that could happen if you try this? Well, I'd prefer to ask, what's the best that could happen? What's the most amazing outcome that could come from taking this new action that I'm deciding to take? That gets me excited. That gets me motivated. That pivots me to my strength when I think about the best possible outcome. Here's an example. You're at home, you're by yourself, and suddenly there's a knock on the door or the doorbell rings, and you haven't been expecting anybody. What happens in your mind immediately, right? For most of us, if we're normal, what happens is, what's wrong? Who is that? Why is somebody not? It must be bad news. Maybe it's the police knocking on my door telling me that my son's been in a car accident. Some kind of bad news arriving. That's how we instantly go. That's the habit that we've developed over all these years of training. But what if we pivoted and began to train ourselves to say, oh, I bet that's the Publishers Clearinghouse showing up at my front door with my big check for $1 million. Because the likelihood of the one is just as great, in fact, probably greater. It's greater chance that it's good news than there is bad news. Because when you think about it, there are more good things that go on in your life than there are bad things. You get good news more often than you get bad news. Now, we tend to focus on the bad news. We tend to talk about it and converse about it more than the good news. But that also is just a habit, because we've been doing it for so long, because people like talking about it, because we talk with other people who are also worrywarts, and they bring up all the terrible things, and so we fall back into that habit again. But what if you could change this habit? What if you could wake up every single morning saying, what amazing things are going to happen today? I know that I'm going to be bombarded with good news today. I know that I'm going to be bombarded with tremendous opportunities today. I know that I'm going to have wonderful accomplishments today, because the truth is, you do have those things every single day. We just don't focus on them enough. We're in the habit of focusing on the nasty things. And what would you try if you weren't ever afraid? What would you try if you woke up every morning feeling strong? What would you try? What would you attempt if every morning you said, I'm going to give that a try? Because what's the best that could come out of that? And then you went for it. And you said, yeah, let's go for this. Let's give it a try, shall we? So that's where we want to go. That's where we want to begin. Now, how do we begin this pivot? How do we begin this? Well, the first thing that we have to do is become an observer of our emotions. And there's a bit of a challenge to that because our emotions are different. Like, for example, if you have a cut on your finger, you get a little paper cut, or you cut yourself open when you're slicing the vegetables or something like that. You got a cut in your finger. Now, it hurts, right? It hurts, and it's painful. Maybe it bleeds a little, and you have to put a Band-Aid on it. But when you have a cut in your finger, that cut is extremely localized, and so is the pain, right? It's right there on the tip of my finger, and it hurts like heck. But while it's hurting, your left foot feels great, doesn't it? There's nothing wrong with your left foot at all. Emotional pain, though, feels different. Emotional pain kind of occupies our entire self, which makes it harder to be objective about it. And when you think about it, the language that we use becomes different too. I have a cut. I am worried. See the difference there? A cut is something I have, and after a while I won't have it. But I am worried. And worry is who I am. That's my identity. And it's harder to be detached and observant of that than it is to observe something like a cut and the pain from that. That emotional pain becomes more difficult. So we have to begin to step back, and we have to adopt this sort of third-party observer. And that takes a little practice as well. But I want you to start thinking about your feelings. Am I feeling good? Am I feeling bad? And if I'm feeling good, why? Why am I feeling good right now? Let's get a little deeper and analyze those emotions. I'm feeling good because I'm investing some time in an online course about how to feel better about myself, and I feel good for having invested this time. I feel good because I'm hearing news that things are starting to open back up again. Oh, now I'm feeling bad. What am I feeling bad about? Oh, I'm feeling bad because I just got off the phone with a friend and the whole conversation was about, how terrible things are. Okay, well, let's observe that. Let's not judge it. Let's simply observe it. Because as we are pivoting and as we're growing, right now, for most of us, we are in a zone, are surrounding this whole coronavirus thing. We're in a zone of fear. And the thoughts that are going on our head and the behaviors that are coming out of that are very fear-based, aren't they? We're acting from a place of fear. And the things are, when I'm shopping, I grab food and I grab medications and I grab toilet paper that I probably don't even need, but I'm doing it because I'm acting out of fear, aren't I? And I'm spreading emotions. I'm not giving off those vibes of joy. I'm giving off vibes of fear and anxiety. And when I'm in conversations with others, I complain about things. I complain about being stuck in my house. I complain about I'm uncertain about my economic future. And those people complain back to me, and my head gets more and more filled with this fear. And when I get messages on Facebook or on Twitter or in my email, I forward them to everybody else, and I keep spreading that emotion. This is when we're in this sort of fear zone that surrounds all the news that's currently around us. All right? And I don't want to do that. And what I want to do is now evolve and take a conscious step from a zone of fear into a zone of learning. I want to move and graduate from a fear zone to a learning zone. Now, what does that, what starts happening when I move into a learning zone instead of a fear zone? Well, now I'm consciously having thoughts that say, okay, there are some things I can't control going on out there. I'm not going to try to control them. I'm just going to relax. And I know, because I went through this exercise of, remembering all the calamities I've lived through before, and I survived them. And I was just fine. And this one will be too, so I'm going to let go of it right now. And I stop, and I'm aware that I want to stop compulsively consuming. What am I compulsively consuming? Consuming things that are not good for me. The foods that I'm eating. Am I eating, my comfort eating now? Am I eating things that are not good for me? Am I consuming news and other emotions that are not good for me? Well, I'm going to start being aware that I'm doing that. And this is how I begin to pivot away from the fear and towards my strength. And I start identifying my emotions and recognizing, okay, I'm in a zone of fear again. I would like to move out of that. And so I'm going to consciously choose my thought and change the thought that I'm entertaining right now. I'm going to move to a different thought than I have. I take it easy on myself. I cut myself some slack. And, everybody's talking about, we've got all this time on our hands. I'm going to write a book this week, and I'm going to sort my 10,000 photographs next week, and I'm going to, take up marathon running the week after that. No, you're not. And don't even try, because when we set all those ridiculous goals for ourselves and then we don't, we feel bad and we beat up on ourselves. This is a time to go easy on yourself. Recognizing that there's enough going on that you don't have to be the one that piles on top of that. You don't have to be the one that adds even more emotional burdens to yourself. This is a time to go easy on yourself. And I'm conscious of evaluating information, and I'm starting to think for myself. And just because a piece of news has arrived at me doesn't mean I necessarily accept it as being facts, or that I accept it as having some horrible impact on me. I'm going to analyze that a little bit more for myself, and I'm going to think about it for myself. And I'm going to recognize that all of us are doing the best we possibly can. See, and now what we've done is transition from that zone of fear, and we've started that pivot, and now we're into a place of learning. And now we can go from a place of learning and consciously move on to a place of growth. And how do I do that? How do I go from a place of learning to an emotional place of growth? Well, I begin to start thinking of other people. And other people who are struggling a little bit. And instead of engaging in conversation with them that's going to drag us both down, I'm going to start turning the conversation to more positive things and avoiding the negative side of a conversation. That's something I can do to a place of growth, and it helps me and it helps the person that I'm conversing with. If I've got some talents, I'm going to start sharing those talents. And even if that talent is simply cheering somebody else up, I'm going to start investing in that kind of an activity as opposed to the fear-based activities. I'm going to start being more appreciative of the things that I have. I was at the grocery store yesterday, and here's this young grocery store worker with a mask on, and she's out there and she's spraying and cleaning all the handles of the grocery carts. So when I walk in and I grab the grocery cart, I know that it's safe for me to touch. And I said, and I thanked her very much. And I meant it when I thanked her. And so we appreciate the things. And the fact that I could walk around that grocery store and there were bananas there and there was milk on the shelf that I could get. Still no toilet paper, but that's okay. But we start appreciating and being grateful for the things that we do have. Being grateful that you get to spend time and sleep in your own bed. And, I read an article yesterday about how families that are staying home together are discovering that the quality of their lives is actually going up. Kids are inventing their own games and they're getting along together because they're not now suddenly, subject to that incredibly rigid agenda and hurry up schedule that modern life is. And so let's be appreciative of the fact that some things are going on that are actually pretty cool, and that there are some unintended consequences coming out of this event that just might help us pivot to a better quality of life as we go forward as well. I'm going to be focusing on those things because they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. And I'm also going to, as I shift from fear to learning to growth, I'm going to make sure that I take time and be quiet in myself. I'm going to practice quietude. I'm going to practice mindfulness. Maybe I'll take 10 minutes each day and do some meditation. Just go into a quiet place and close your eyes and be still for a few minutes. And yeah, your mind's going to race with all kinds of things, but now we've got some tools and we can start replacing them with more beneficial thoughts. And you can do that. And these are some of the things that you can start changing, some of these new habits, some of these new mental and emotional habits. You know, and we can go through these zones from a place of fear to a place of learning, to a place of growth. And you can go through those. Now, I want to move on and talk about another really, really important aspect of this pivot from fear to pivot to growth. This is probably the most fundamental principle that you can put in place. And that is that we all begin to take 100% responsibility for everything that happens in our life. Now, how do you do that? Because you say, how can I take responsibility for that? Somebody else told me that I'm have to stay in my home. Somebody else told me that I can't show up to work. Somebody else, I didn't cause this virus. How can I take responsibility for that? No, I'm not asking you to take responsibility for the virus or for the economics or anything else like that. What I am asking you to do, or suggesting that you do, is take responsibility for your reactions to those things. One of my teachers is a fellow, you might be familiar with him, a fellow named Jack Canfield. And Jack Canfield, he's the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. You've perhaps encountered that. And he's the author of a book called The Success Principles. And this is one of those success principles, this idea of taking 100% responsibility for yourself. And why is it that we do this? Well, let's look at a couple of sides of that. Because if I point to somebody else and I say, okay, I am stuck in my house now. I can't go out. I can't go to my job. I can't, go out to the park. I can't go to the shopping mall. And I start looking for others to blame for that, or I look at external circumstances to blame for that. As long as I am complaining about that situation or blaming others for the situation that I find myself, I am completely powerless to improve my own life. Let's repeat that, okay? Because this is a really fundamental point. As long as I believe that it's somebody else's fault that of what is happening to me, you know, if the government had responded more quickly, if whoever, whatever had happened, then I wouldn't be in this situation. Well, as long as we're feeling that way, then until whoever we're blaming changes their behavior, we're stuck. We have no power whatsoever to change our situation. But as soon as we start to take responsibility, we can say, okay, these things have happened. Yep, I'm stuck in my house, but I'm going to make the best of being stuck in this house that I possibly can. I'm going to be the best gosh darn home dweller that I can imagine being. And that changes everything, doesn't it? Because as long as I'm blaming somebody else, my situation won't change. And this goes way beyond coronavirus or anything else. It might be a relationship. Okay, so your boyfriend, your girlfriend dumped you. Or your mother doesn't want to, doesn't stop calling you. or your boss decided that you were going to get downsized. All right, as long as we blame those other people or the circumstances for what's going on, um, we're now victims of them, and that's a victim mentality, and we've got no power to change anything. But as soon as we say, all right, my girlfriend dumped me, my boss downsized me, okay, great. What am I going to do now? Now, what will I do going forward? Then you start to take control over your situation. There's a great little exercise that we can that I like to go through, and it's called can't or won't. So let's try it here, and I invite you to play with this a little bit for yourself as well. So I can't leave my house. I can't go to the mall. I can't go and walk in the park that I like to go in. I can't find toilet paper. Okay, great. How does that feel when we say those things? Well, it leaves us feeling powerless. It leaves us feeling victimized. It leaves us feeling like all the power is in somebody else's hands. But what if instead we said, I won't buy toilet paper. I won't go walk in the park. Now, suddenly, you're the one that's making that decision, right? Because there is toilet paper to be had. You could go walk in the park if you want. I mean, our parks around here, all there is a little chain that says park closed. It doesn't stop me from stepping over the chain and going for a walk. I'm making the choice to not do that. And suddenly that gives me the power over my own choices. And that suddenly restores to me a set of strength that I didn't have when I was being victimized. And so this is the pivot that I'm making from I can't do these things to no, I won't do these things. Now, there's a day coming soon when I will do these things, whether somebody tells me I can or not. And when the park is back open again, I will make the decision about whether I'm going or not. When the barber shop is back open again, I'll make the decision as to whether I grow my hair long and shaggy or not. All right? Can't or won't. Because the truth is, as soon as you start saying I won't, the next step is I will. I can. I'm going to. And now you own the power again. And you have pivoted from a place of weakness to a place of strength. There's the inner monologue that we all have, the self-talk that goes on in our heads about, we're our own worst critic. Oh, I can't do that. Well, guess what? If you've convinced yourself that you can't, then it's guaranteed that you can't. But as soon as you say you won't, well, now you've got the option of saying, yeah, I will. And if it's, I won't, I can't run a marathon. Okay, well then if you say you can't, you can't. But if you say I won't run a marathon, then it's you're now making the choice and you've pivoted to strength. And then you can go from I won't to I might think about running a marathon. And then, yeah, I can run a marathon if I set my mind to it, because you can. And then I will run a marathon. And I'm going to start by running 100 yards. And then tomorrow I'll run 110 yards. And who knows, 6 months from now, a year from now, I will be running a marathon, because it's now your choice. That's how we start regaining the strength that we have given up previously. That's how we pivot to that strength, by choosing the emotional reaction we have. That emotional reaction we have is entirely up to us. But remember what we said earlier. The emotional reaction that we typically have is simply out of habit, because we've been trained to do it this way. From the earliest days, we've been trained to worry, and everybody else is doing it. So therefore, I suppose it's normal. I guess I should too. There's something wrong with you if you don't worry. No, there's something wrong with me if I do. And now I can choose. I really prefer not to worry, thanks very much. And when I remind myself that worry does nothing, that accomplishes nothing, it doesn't solve a problem, it doesn't make the problem go away, all it does is make me even more sick. You know, in this time of coronavirus, one of the really interesting things is we want to have strong immune systems. They're telling us it's the people with the weakened immune systems who are most susceptible. Well, one of the greatest and easiest ways to weaken your immune system is through anxiety. So I'm going to choose, I won't worry. I can't stop worrying. Yes, I can. I'm going to choose to stop worrying. Now, when we think about this 100% responsibility notion, when we think about that, there's a formula, and again, I got this from Jack Canfield, and the formula is that E, think of it like Einstein, is E equals mc squared. Well, in this case, E plus R equals O. Now, what does that stand for? E is an event. E is something that has happened out there. E is how things are. It's the current situation. So our current situation is we've got coronavirus. Our current situation is I'm stuck at home. Our current situation is there's an uncertain economy going on. All right, that's an event. That's the way things are out there. Now, E plus R, what's R? R is our response to what's going on. R is our response to the current things that are happening out there. Now, what is my response? Well, my response could be worry. My response could be anxiety. My response could be panic. My response could be anger. Do any of those things be helpful to us? Not one of them is helpful to us. Not one of them changes the situation. But if my response was calmness, if my response was resourcefulness and innovation, then I'm starting to take control of the situation, aren't I? I'm starting to be in charge. Perhaps you've heard of him, a fellow named Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a psychologist in Austria in the 1930s, in pre-World War II. And he was Jewish. And when the Nazis took over, he got sent to a concentration camp. And I mean, the most hideous circumstances. I mean, we've got, this is pretty luxurious in comparison, don't you think? And yet he, as a psychologist, he started studying the people around him. And what he discovered was that the people who had purpose in their life, the people who had something to live for, were the ones that survived. The people who made that mental choice to own their own responses, to say, yes, they might have made my body a captive, but they can never force me to think something other than what I'm currently thinking. Those were the people that survived and thrived and went on to great lives. And we're in a situation like now. I'm not even going to begin to compare what we're in now with Nazi concentration camps. That would be obscene to make that comparison. But the fact is, we're in a potentially stressful situation. How are we choosing to respond? You always have that choice. So E, the event, plus R, your response, equals O. What's O? Is the outcome. What is the outcome as a result of your response? Now, if our response is worry and anxiety, the outcome is we feel awful, we're disempowered, our immune systems get weaker, etc. But if our response is strength and resourcefulness, it doesn't mean storming out into the streets. It means, okay, given these constraints that I've got around me now, I mean, look at me here. I've got this, spare bedroom that I have to be doing from. I can't do it from our nice studio. Given these constraints, how do I respond? How do I choose to respond in this situation, given this event, given these circumstances? How do I respond? Because that determines the outcome that I'm going to get from this event that's going on. The choice and the power are in your hands to choose your response. Now, what I want to do for a few minutes is just to give you some hints Um, One of the things that we do in our workshops and in our longer um, online course, we have this Unsubscribe from Anxiety online course, which is 7 full modules. And one of the things that we do is we walk our attendees and our students, walk them through a guided visualization. And what we do is, if you think about worry and anxiety and fear, they tend to show up physically in our bodies, don't they? Different people in different ways. For some of us, it shows up in our jaw, people clenching their jaws all the time. Some people, it's a tension headache. Some people, it's in their shoulders, and the tension that's in their shoulders or in their neck. Some people, it's in their stomachs. It shows up in different ways, but it always shows up physically. And what I like to do is take people through a guided meditation that allows them to literally take control of that worry, that anxiety, that fear that's inside them. And so for a moment, I'm going to invite you right now just to relax. And if you want, you can close your eyes if you're sitting comfortably, and I'll just talk you through this and just take a couple of minutes. And I want you to think about the anxiety that you're feeling, because it always shows up as a physical feeling. Where is it showing up in you? Is it in your shoulders? Is it in your jaw? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your buttocks? Where is that anxiety? And I want you to imagine it as a physical object that's inside you. Maybe it's like an iron rod, that's holding you tense, stretched between your shoulders. Or maybe it's, just this rigid object that's stuck inside you there. And I want you to take a moment and visualize that thing. And then, and visualization is so wonderful because we can use our imaginations to create anything we want. I want you to take that object. So for me, it always shows up in my shoulders. That's where the tension always shows up. And it feels like this iron rod that stretches from one shoulder tip to the other, whatever it is for you. But what I want you to do now is to take that object that's in you, that tension, imagine it as a physical object, and now I want you to stretch it. All right, imagine it growing, and it's coming right outside your body, and it's expanding so it's touching all the walls of the room. And let it be big for a moment. Now I want you to shrink it down, shrink it really, really small, just in your mind. Make it really as tiny as you possibly can. And now I want you to take that object and I want you to move it through your body. So if it's in your shoulders or if it's in your jaw, I want you to move it down to your left foot. Watch it just traverse through your body and down your leg. Now I want you to take it and move it out to your right hand. Just move it across your body. See how you start to take control over this thing that's kind of occupying your body. Now it belongs to you, and you're in charge of it, not it in charge of you. Now I want you to take it back to the opposite side of your body. Now I want you to take it and move it down your right arm all the way out into your hand, and then have it pop out of your skin, and now it's sitting in the palm of your hand. Think of it like a baseball, and you're just sort of holding it and tossing it up and down like you would a baseball. Now kind of mentally reach down, just set it on the floor there beside your feet, and picture that piece of anxiety just there, right on the floor beside your foot. Give it a little nudge with your foot if you want. Now reach down and pick it back up with your hand again and move it from one hand to the other, kind of toss it back and forth a little bit. Now I want you to picture it sitting in your hand. There it is, just holding in your hand. But now instead of that being a rock hard thing, I want you to watch it kind of vaporize a little bit, like maybe it's turning into dust. So instead of a hard thing, it's getting softer and softer. And now it's just like a dust ball there. And now I want you to take a deep breath and just blow it away. And watch it just kind of disappear into the air. Now, go back to the spot in your body where that tension usually resides. And I want you to check, is it there still? Or has it gone away somewhere suddenly? Do you feel your shoulders are a little loose, your jaw isn't quite as tense as it was? That's how this works. That's how we start pivoting. And we can, because what's happened is you actually decided that you were going to take charge take control of that anxiety instead of it controlling you. And that's how we start to pivot to strength. Now, in our workshops and in the online course, we do a lot more coaching on that. We don't have that kind of time here today. But what we find, and there was a woman in a workshop a while ago, and as she was walking out, she says, wow, my shoulders and my neck don't feel tight anymore. And that was just in the span of 90-minute workshop. And that's what can happen to you as well as you pivot to this strength. You say, no, I'm not going to entertain those anxious thoughts anymore. I don't need them. They don't serve me. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is, because anxiety is a habit, we talked about that. It's a mental habit. It's an emotional habit that we've had for so long. But like any habit, you can replace that habit, but you have to replace it. You can't simply eliminate it, because a void will get filled and that old habit will come back in. If you've ever tried to stop smoking, you know how difficult that is. You got to do something else with your hands. You got to, find a different activity. And so what we want to do is start replacing anxiety and worry and fear with new, different mental habits. And there are 3 major habits that we want to start replacing it with. These are new ways of thinking. And the first one is gratitude and appreciation. When we start each day by, you wake up and immediately list 5 things that you're grateful for. I'm grateful for this bed that was so comfy all night long, and this pillow that my head's been on. Oh, that felt good. And I'm grateful for that sun coming in the window. I'm grateful for the people that are going to show up at my Facebook Live event this afternoon. I'm so grateful for all of these things. When we start developing that habit, that gratitude as a mental position that we take, what we discover is that there is no more room in our brains for anxiety and worry. Fear just can't get in there when I am being grateful. There is no room for that fear to take hold. And it's a wonderful feeling. So I want you to start the practice of, maybe 3 or 4 times through the day, pause, maybe put it in your calendar or put it on your phone as a reminder to pop up and say, okay, find 4 things within the last 2 hours that you can be grateful for. Because that's how we start building this new habit, the new habit of gratitude instead of the old habit of fear and anxiety. So that's the first one. The second one is something I like to call replace it with purpose. Now, every single one of us was born for a particular reason. We may or may not know what that reason is. Some of us know exactly what that reason is. I read a thing a while ago, and it said there are the 2 most important days in your life. For number 1, the day you're born, and the second one is the day you figure out why. So why are you here? What is your purpose in life? What's your mission? What is it you want to accomplish while you're here on Earth? And for most of us, unfortunately, most of the time, it's, make a living, raise a family, whatever. But it's not a driving purpose. We take some truly iconic people, and you see their purposes in life. You see Bill Gates, his stated purpose in life earlier was to put a computer on every desk, give a computer in every home. Wow, and he pretty much did that, and now he's moved on to a different purpose. Now, your purpose and my purpose doesn't have to be earth-shattering like that. I remember my wife had an aunt, wonderful, wonderful woman, and her purpose in her elderly years was she would knit, and she would knit those little caps, little knit stocking caps for the preemies, the babies who were born prematurely in the hospitals. She would knit and knit and knit, and she'd turn out dozens of these things, and that's what she lived for. And she lived to be 98, 99 years old. And because she had something to get up for every morning. It was wonderful. And when we have that purpose, regardless of what it is, if you can be a gardener, you can be the best darn gardener that's ever been, the best gardener that you can possibly be. Maybe you write poetry. Maybe you're a cook. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Pour yourself into that. Because when you have this purpose, this driving purpose, there is no room in your mind for worry and anxiety and fear. There's no room whatsoever. It's wonderful because now you wake up and you've got things to do. You've got reasons for getting up, things for going on, reasons to overcome those obstacles that might get in your way. And that's the second major habit that we want to replace our anxiety with. And the third one is something I call instant action. What does that mean, instant action? What it means is that when I'm observing my fears and observing my emotions, and I discover myself feeling anxiety, feeling worried about something, and maybe it's in the middle of the night, maybe it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm lying there wide awake and all I can think about is this thing that's worrying me. What do? Stop lying there trying to worry and trying to get back to sleep again. Get up. Get up and find something that you can do in the next 5 minutes to help alleviate that thing that you're worried about. All right, so what are you worried about? Well, I'm worried about my finances. Okay, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Get up, sit down at your desk, turn on the light, and start a preliminary budget. That's it. And you've done something, because now what you've done is you've taken back the power. You've regained that. You said, no, I'm in charge here. Fear is not in charge. Worry is not in charge. I'm in charge. I'm the one that gets to decide what's going on in my mind. And here it is, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to decide that I'm going to make a budget. Or maybe you're worried about your health and you say, okay, I'm worried about, aside from coronavirus, I'm worried, packing it on a little bit here. I really should be in better condition than I am. Great. What are you going to do in the next 5 minutes to address that? Are you going to, how about, assuming things are back to normal, what if you join, call up, go online, join a health club? There you go. You've done something towards that. You have regained the power. The fear, you took over from it, and you decided that you're going to do something different instead of worrying. Now you're in charge, that instant action. And now, having taken that action within that 5 minutes, what's something you can do in the next 24 hours to further address this challenge, this problem that you feel worried about? Because now you're taking charge. There's always things you can do about it. There's always something that you can do. What are you going to do? So those are those 3 major habits that I want you to start replacing anxiety with. The first one, gratitude. Find things constantly, 3-4 times a day, first thing in the morning, last thing at night. What am I grateful for? It changes everything. Fear has no room in a grateful mind. Fear cannot enter into a grateful mind. The second thing, what is your purpose? When you have that reason for getting up in the morning, when you have things to do, whether even if you're stuck at home, I got things that I have to do. Maybe it's time that you did start working on that novel that you've been promising yourself for decades that you're going to write. Okay, good. There's something that you can do. Now you've got a reason for getting up and not switching on CNN instantly or Fox News or whatever it is that you're going to do. Not picking up the phone and instantly going on social media and retweeting all these horrible things. Sorry, I'm busy. I got things that I have to do. And the third one is that instant action. What are you going to do right now to start replacing that fear? Those are those 3 major habits that we're going to use to replace this habit of anxiety. The habit of anxiety does nothing for you. It makes you sick. It makes you feel awful. It robs you of your potential, and it doesn't solve the problem. So why don't we decide that that's a habit I just don't need? It's not serving me well. It's not allowing me to show up as who I want to show up as. So I won't have that anymore. I just don't need it. I'm going to let it go. But here's what I'm replacing it with. Let me toss you a few more minor habits. Those are the big three. Here's some more minor ones that you can use as you pivot to this strength. Things that you can use to replace the habit of fear and anxiety. All right. First one, quit the complaining club. Resign your membership in the whining group, right? Because you know them. They're the people you get on the phone and instantly it's, oh, this is terrible and that's terrible and sun's shining now, but it's going to rain this afternoon. You know these people. They've been hanging around for too long, and those emotions are contagious. You think coronavirus is contagious? Emotions are instantaneously contagious. And when you hang around with people with negative emotions, you catch them and they drag you down too. So let's just quit that complaining club. Now, I get it that there are always some people in your life that you're kind of stuck with, whether it's family or whoever, but minimize the time. Nobody's holding a gun to your head and saying you must spend time with these people. Shift away, pivot away, and engage with people. Seek out those people who are uplifting, whose conversations are joyful, whose conversations focus on the wonderful things that are going on. It's just going to make you feel better. And then you lift yourself up, and then you feel that inner strength starting to grow inside you. That's what you can do when you quit the complaining club. Now, of course, you want to, limit yourself, your intake of news. If you turn on that TV and it just goes all day, and in the background, you're bombarding your mind with this terrible, toxic stuff. I mean, can you imagine sitting there all day long drinking poison? Well, that's what's happening with your mind when your eyes and your ears are taking in all this negativity. It poisons your mind. And of course, the result is going to be fear and anxiety. You can't help it. So, keep that to an absolute minimum. It is entirely possible to stay informed without bombarding yourself with nonstop 24/7 news reports. And it's so much more healthy. We're all very careful these days. The world has become much more conscious of what we eat and our diet that we have. What we take into our bodies, the food we eat, we look for organic, we look for additive free, we look for chemical free, we look for all kinds of foods because we know the effect it'll have on our body. I want to be just as careful of what I take into my mind because it is every bit as poisonous, if not more so, than the things that we take into our body. So limit your exposure to the news. And while you're at it, limit your exposure to social media. Because, if news, and it can be addicting, there's no question about it, but if news is addicting, then social media is crack cocaine. And we get on there and we know how bad it makes us feel. There are the filters seem to have disappeared. And stuff that flies around there is it truly is poisonous. Now, there are some great ones. I've found some wonderful websites that focus on good news. There's a great one called that I found recently, and it's called Reasons to Be Cheerful. Reasonstobecheerful.world. You might want to check that one out. It's great. I go on there every couple of days and, just energize myself with all the wonderful things that are going on in the world, because there are tremendous things that are going on in the world. You wouldn't know it to listen to some radio and TV stations and watch some podcast or listen to some podcasts and etc. But there are. Start filling your mind with that sort of thing instead of the negatives. Just like you've adjusted your diet, your food diet, adjust your mental diet as well. In this time especially, make sure that you seek out uplifting entertainment. A lot of us are doing a whole lot of binge watching these days. We got all kinds of time for the movies that we have been making a list of for so long that I want to watch. Well, now's the time we got it because we got nothing else to do. But make sure that the entertainment you're choosing, the movies that you're watching are uplifting, that make you feel good. I am a sucker for rom-coms. I'm a sucker for anything that Pixar puts out. And I don't mind telling everybody I bawl like a baby when I watch this stuff. It just makes me so joyful. And that it's tears of joy that I've got. I'm not sad. I'm just loving it when these things, and I'll just watch that. I'll binge watch that all day long. Right now, I'm in the middle of the Despicable Me and all the minions. They're hilarious, and they just make me feel so wonderful. Do yourself a favor and choose some uplifting entertainment while you're going on it. Do some affirmations. Affirm your fearlessness. Affirm your strength. Now, what are affirmations? Affirmations are spoken out loud thing. I'm so happy and joyful that I'm feeling so strong today. I'm so happy and joyful that I've got this wonderful home to be in during this time. I'm so happy and joyful that that I've got these books that I can read now. Affirm your strength. I'm so happy and joyful that I have now ways of pivoting to my strength. It makes me feel wonderful. So affirm your fearlessness on a daily basis. Make sure that you remind yourself how fearless you actually are. You've got that strength in you. Now reach down and pull it up, and we can do that with our affirmations. Focus on your successes. Remember when we started this program, what are we now? About an hour and a half we've been going, 90 minutes. When we started off with that exercise that reminded you of those victories, of those accomplishments that you've had in the past. You are that same person. You are the person that has that strength, that has that resilience and resourcefulness. You are that creative energy that's previously solved problems that you faced. The problems in life will never go away. It's how we approach them. What's the attitude we bring to them? And when the attitude we bring to them is anxiety and fear, then they are capable of overwhelming us. When we remind ourselves of those tremendous strength that we do have, that resiliency that we do have that's deep down inside us, then we can overcome anything. Remind yourself of those, review those accomplishments, pull those old trophies out of the cardboard box in the attic, put them on the mantle again, hang up those diplomas that you earned. Pull out your Boy Scout badges or your Girl Guide badges and say, yeah, look what I did. And if I did that then when I knew nothing, what can I do now? What are the tremendous things that I can accomplish now that I couldn't even begin to think about then? You are so much more now than you were then. You are so much more than you even believe or even think you are. You have capabilities and resources that you can't even dream of. The problem is that when we allow anxiety and fear and worry to occupy our mind, those resources get pushed down and we're not able to draw on them. And I want you to be able to draw on them. I want you to be able to reach down and grab them in times like this when we require them. You have them there. You have that strength, and you can reach in and pull it up, and it'll get you through absolutely anything. So remember to focus on those successes that you've had in the past. Remind yourself what an amazing person you actually are. Remember also to go easy on yourself. I mentioned this earlier. Don't setting goals is wonderful, but set reasonable ones. No, you're not going to write 6 novels while you're sheltering in place. No, you're not going to learn to speak Spanish or learn to speak Mandarin or anything like that. That's not going to happen in this time, nor should it happen. All right, you might want to be thinking about your post quarantine life. Sure, that would be great. Start setting some goals for yourself, but right now, take it easy on yourself. Cut yourself some slack. And that doesn't mean wallow in fear. No, that doesn't mean wallow in fear. It means just letting go, being present, being in the moment and saying, right now, when I look around myself, there is nothing wrong. My stomach's full, my brain is happy, my body is comfortable. I'm all good. Right now, in this moment, think about it, do you have any problems at all right in this very instant? No, you don't. I don't, and you don't either. Now, when we spend all our time imagining the future, then we can create all kinds. But all that is, the word fear, FEAR, that's an acronym. It stands for fantasized events appearing real. And that's what we're doing. We're fantasizing about a future that hasn't and probably won't even materialize. And we're suffering that future right now in this moment, rather than saying, no, right now in this moment, everything's very cool. And I'm just fine. Thank you very much. And that future, well, if I spend all my time worrying about it, then it's likely to come out. But if instead I shift and say, no, I'm going to be grateful. I'm going to focus on my purpose. I'm going to have instant action. Then that fantasized future, it's never going to come. But now let's fantasize about a wonderful future. And that's the one that's going to show up in your life. Because you've taken control of what's going on in your mind. Your mind creates your reality. Your mind is constantly paving out your future. That's how we create our future, by our thoughts and by the things that we spend our time focusing on. Spend your time focusing on those wonderful things that you know are going to happen, you know are going to come, and then they will. That's how you replace the habit of worry with the habit of joy, and with the habit of gratitude, and with the habit of action. It's wonderful that way. Now, another habit, and I touched on it earlier, and that is take a few minutes every day, just 10 minutes. Go to a quiet place, close the door, make sure you're not, turn off all the radios and the TVs and stuff where you can. Sit comfortably and just close your eyes and do a little meditation. Now, I'm not talking about, going to some nirvana place where the Buddhist monks are. You can't do that. I can't do that. But if we just try and still our mind a little bit, focus on your breathing. Breath is in, breath is out, and just focusing on that. And if you set yourself 10 minutes, just put a little timer on your smartphone to come out of it after 10 minutes. But do it every day. And what you're going to discover is several things. First of all, your mind is going to start to quiet down. At first, I call it monkey brain. Zoom, 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 zoom. It's going all over the place. But after you've practiced a little while, and it doesn't take long, you do this for a week, and suddenly you think, wow, my brain is settling down a lot. It's training, like any other skill that you can have. You can train yourself to meditate, and you can train yourself to quiet your mind. The other thing that's going to happen is throughout your day, you're going to discover that you're able to be much more focused and attentive to the thoughts that are had, which will allow you to go through some of these processes that we've just talked about, and allow you to be more aware of this old fear, anxiety habit that you've had for so long, allow you to start gaining control of it. So I encourage you, 10 minutes each day, just get to a quiet place, quiet your mind. It will be life transforming. It has been for me, and I know it will be for you as well. Now, one of the things I want to talk about, here we are in the midst of this coronavirus, and it's going to go away. There'll be a time when we're up here and talking about, you remember back then when we were all stuck at home and where all the businesses were closed? That was nasty, wasn't it? But it'll be gone. But there'll be something else come along as well. And every day, there's always big things, there's little things, and we choose or not choose to worry about them, to become anxious about them. Now, if anxiety is something that you find yourself stuck with, you feel that you can't get over it, then I would like to offer you something very special. And as I mentioned, we do have, I wrote the book. There it is there. Unsubscribe from Anxiety. I wrote this book last year. Opt out of the myth that worry is required and take charge of your own life now. So that's the book. And basically, this thing that we spent 90 minutes talking, that takes, I don't know, 270 pages to talk about in a lot more detail with a lot more examples and a lot more exercises, etc. Well, I've also created, now that book is available on Amazon. You can go and get that book if you want, and please do. But I also created an online course, an extended one. It's 7 modules, 7 weeks. And with coronavirus going on right now and with so much anxiety, I want to make available something very special for this. And for this period only, up until Friday night, Friday at midnight, I'm making it available for a dramatically reduced price. And I'm offering something that I have never offered before. And that is, typically the course is the individual modules that you go through yourself. It's self-paced, and there's 1 per week for 7 weeks. But what I want to do is shift this and go to a situation where I interact with you directly in a one-on-one coaching thing once a week, just after you've been through each of the modules. So following the modules, you and I will get on the phone or get on a Zoom call and talk about what you've learned. And I will coach you through that, and we can deal with directly with your personal situations that you're dealing with. And so again, this is something that I've never offered before, and I'm only doing it as a result of the current situation with coronavirus. And if you would like to sign up for the online course, it's available now. You will get the online course and the 7 modules. You'll get a free copy of the book, and you will get this one-on-one personal coaching following each module as you go through the course, which I think you'll find will help enormously. I'll send you some more information about that after this so that you can sign up. It'll begin on the 5th of May, the first one, and then it'll go for 7 weeks following that. But also, we've got, if you haven't already, if you're not receiving the blog that I put out every Friday, it's called Fearless Friday. We get a lot of good response to that, and I'd invite you to sign up for that blog. You can sign up for our website. If you want to register for the online course, go to our website, I-FearlessTV.com, and right there on the homepage, you can see where to click to sign up for that. All right, let's get ready to wrap this up, shall we? We've been going now for an hour and 45 minutes, almost, a little bit more. And I want to review what we've talked about. And that is the most important thing is to recognize that anxiety and the fear and the worry that we all suffer from, or that most of us suffer from, is not something that is inherently built into you as a human being. It is a mental habit that we've developed over years and years and years. No one has ever questioned whether it's a good habit or not. We simply see everybody else around us worrying, so we think it's normal, so we do it too. No one has ever said, well, maybe there's an alternative to anxiety. Maybe there's an alternative to worry. It's very normal, but it's not natural, and it is not required by any stretch at all. No one says you must worry about something. And when we think about worrying, and when we think about fear and anxiety, there is absolutely no upside to those emotions that I've ever been able to find. The downsides are tremendous. It feels awful. It makes you sick. It does not solve any problems ever. Just keep going. That's one of the characteristics of anxiety, right? This week, next month, it's still going around and around in circles. The same thoughts over and over and over again. They just won't stop. So it doesn't solve a problem. But the biggest downside, the biggest disadvantage that I know of for anxiety is that it blocks our incredible human potential. It stops us from trying things before we've even tried them. We talk ourselves out of our accomplishments. We talk ourselves out of our own growth. Oh, I couldn't do that. I don't have those capabilities. What if this happened? But the worst, what if that terrible thing might happen? And so we stop before we've even begun to try. That's what I think is the worst outcome from all the fear and anxiety that we see around us. I think it's awful. Now, the beauty is that you don't have to do it. We were taught to worry. We were taught to be anxious. We were taught to be fearful. And it just became a habit. And like any other habit, you can let it go anytime you want. You can decide, I don't like this habit anymore. It no longer serves me. It doesn't allow me to be the me that I want to show up in life as. It doesn't allow me to be pivoting to this strength that I know I have deep inside me. It doesn't allow me to do anything. So I would really like to get rid of it. Anytime you've got a bad habit that doesn't serve you, doesn't it make sense to just be gone with it? I prefer, if I find myself doing something that is being destructive to me or is getting in my way, I want to stop doing it. And fear and anxiety and worry are exactly that. And you can stop worrying about those things. And so we do it by beginning to be aware of our emotions. I begin to be aware of my emotional response to things. Oh, there I go worrying again. There it is. It's my anxious feeling again. And that's the first step. And now I start recognizing, wow, I do this worrying a lot, way more than I need to. So what do? Well, I'm going to shift. I'm going to pivot to my strength, and I'm going to take 100% responsibility for everything that happens in my life. And even if I can't control my physical circumstances, I'm going to choose my mental response to that. You take a guy like Viktor Frankl. He had no control over his physical circumstances, but the one thing that he could control, and every one of us can control, is our mental activity. We can choose our emotional response to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. We can choose worry and anxiety, or we can choose strength and joy and positivity. And I can focus on those things that I do control. And I can focus on those things that are good in my life. And as a result, I feel strong. And then when the opportunity comes, I'm ready to jump on those opportunities and take advantage of them and work from my place of strength. So I'm beginning to choose other responses, other emotions, rather than anxiety, rather than fear, rather than worry. I take 100% responsibility for everything that goes on in my head. And as a result, the things that go on around outside me start to change too. It's wonderful to watch it happening. It's wonderful to watch it change and to realize that, no, I don't need to be afraid of everything. I feel so much stronger when I'm not afraid. I feel so much more powerful, more in control when anxiety has no place in my life. That's how I start to pivot to my strength. Now, I want to wrap this up by reminding us again of those new habits that we can start to adopt. Those big 3 habits. Number 1, that habit of gratitude, that habit of appreciation, not just for the things that are around you that you have in your life to enjoy, but for yourself. Appreciating your health, appreciating your talents, appreciating your wisdom, and appreciating the wonderful things that you contribute to life, you contribute to those around you. When we spend more time being grateful for those, our life just blossoms. The second big habit, replace it with purpose. Why do you get up in the morning? What is your big why? We all spend a lot of time making to-do lists. We all talk about what we need to do, and we talk about when we need to do it, and we talk about how we need to do it. But how often do we ask why? Like really deep. Why am I doing this? Why am I in this career? Why am I choosing to spend my time doing these things? My time is precious. My mental energy is precious. What is it that I want to focus those resources on? What is your why? We all have one. Most of us have not been in touch with it. Spend some time now, and this is a perfect time. We're all in a big pause, aren't we? That's a good time to spend some time thinking, what is my why? What is it I want to accomplish with what I've got remaining in my life? What do I want to leave behind me? Doesn't have to be huge. It could be knitted little bonnets for preemie babies. It could be a computer in every home. It could be something anywhere in between. Those are marvelous whys. What's your why? What do you live for? And the final new habit is that instant action. When you find yourself being fearful, when you find yourself being anxious about something, right away, catch yourself. Oh, there I go. There I go, fearful. What is it I'm worried about? Am I worried about my money? Am I worried about my health? Am I worried about a relationship? What am I worried about? Okay, what is something I can do right now in the next 5 minutes to address that thing I'm worried about? What is it I can do? And then do it. And then what's something else I can do in the next 24 hours? And then do it. And suddenly you own the strength. Suddenly you have the power. You're the one that's making the choices about your life. And anxiety and worry have no place in your life. Why? Because you have pivoted, haven't you? You've gone from a place of fear and anxiety and worry, and you've pivoted to a place of strength and power and control of your own life. And when you're there, you can accomplish anything. And so what I want to do is say thank you so much for joining me here today in this special presentation, Pivot to Strength. As you can see, it was put together a little quickly, not exactly the the environment I like to broadcast from, but hey, it's what we've got right now, isn't it? And next time I promise I'll get a haircut and look a little tidier. But in the meantime, it's the ideas that we're sharing that matter. So thank you so much for joining me, and I really look forward to seeing you again very, very soon in a place of tremendous strength.